Take the prayer, please, together. Master of all worlds, highest power, merciful parent of compassion, in your presence, eternal one, source of strength for us, as you have been for our ancestors, we very humbly acknowledge you. What are we? What is our life that you have done such great kindness to us? Therefore, we place our appeals before you, so that you may forgive and absolve us of all our faults and failings, that our faults never become barriers between us and you. And may it be your desire to prepare our hearts to feel awe and love for you. May you listen to these words of ours, and may you open our encumbered hearts through the mysteries of your Torah. May this, our study, be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory, like sweet incense. May you shower down upon us the light of our soul source in all the ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparks of your holy servants, through whom you have revealed these words to the world, shine and sparkle. May their merit, their ancestors' merit, the merit of their Torah, their innocence, their holiness, stand for us so as to prevent us from stumbling when we study these words. In their merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet singer of Israel, open my eyes, that I may gaze into wonders of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the Eternal who grants wisdom. It is from his mouth that knowledge and understanding issue forth. Na 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 na. Good evening. We're on page 313. And we started a story, an extended walking story, back on page 309. Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi were walking on the way. As they were walking, they saw Rabbi Asa, the elder, walking behind them. They wait for him. They catch up together and they walk on. And Rabbi Chia says, it's time for us to study Torah. So Rabbi Yossi opens. Then we have page 311. Rabbi Chia begins to speak. And he brings in the whole question of how to combat evil through shrewdness. And then Rabbi Asa, the third partner of this three sages, he also contributes, and that's on page 312. And we have the ending of that section, the ending of the three Divrei Torah, the three expositions of Torah by each of these sages, ending with a note of hope that eventually, of course, Israel, Jacob, the children of Israel, the blessings will come true for them, and there will be no one frightening them forever and ever. Right? So that's the hope at the end. So that's where we left off. So now we're at the next section of this, and 313 after the break. Who's going to read for us today? I think it's going to be Beryl.
They walked on. As they were walking, Rabbi.
Wait a second, thank you. That's enough. It's enough. How much Zohar can you take in at one time? You know, let's just take a little bit at a time. So now this is my little obsession that the Zohar puts this in. They walked on. We know that they're walking on the road. They're walking on the road together. They walked on. As they were walking, Rabbi Yossi says, and then we go on. So, what would be so terrible if we had Rabbi Yossi, we had Rabbi Chia opened after Rabbi Yossi, and then Rabbi Asa opened after Rabbi Chia. Now we can have, and now Rabbi Yossi opens after Rabbi Asa. We'll just keep it going. This extra little piece, is functions in any number of ways. So one way that it functions simply is that it makes the Torahs that they say. When I say the Torahs that they say, that these discussions, these teachings of Torah that each one says, it makes them, even though they're written for us here, it makes them into Torah Sheba'al Peh instead of Torah Shebichtav. It turns them back into oral Torah from written Torah. Now, of course, they were originally oral Torah, and that's exactly the point. The point is that they are words that are said on the road as they're walking along. This is not a text. This is people speaking to each other. It eventually becomes a text. That's one of the old answers of how to read that verse that we started out with. Eit la'asot l'Hashem hefera toratecha. It's time to do something on behalf of God, so we have to nullify the Torah. What does that mean? According to one explanation, we're not supposed to write down the oral Torah. The whole essence of the oral Torah is that it should be alive, that it should be spoken word that can flit from one person to another, and then create a dynamic within the other person's response, and so on. Texts are frozen. So the original idea of the rabbis was that we were not allowed to write down the oral Torah, and we were actually supposed to always read the written Torah from a written script. So to be sure that we were respecting it and true to it. But the oral Torah was not supposed to be written down so that it wouldn't be frozen, so that it wouldn't be compromised in its essence. But then we did write it down, and God knows how much we've written down. We've written it down more and more and more and more and more and more. So the Mishnah is the first piece of oral Torah that becomes written down, and then you've got generations and centuries of discussions that are somehow put down into the Talmud, and then you've got everything beyond that. And these were live discussions that eventually became texts. So one of the things that this little set of words in our text is doing is it brings us back into the living reality of the communication. They walked on. As they were walking, Rabbi Yossi said. So it turns this text, which could live on its own as a teaching of wisdom, of Torah, it turns it into a speech in a story, right? It turns the text into a piece of narrative. So this is the ongoing lived experience of these people. We're following along as they're moving on the road, as they're moving one foot in front of the other, and even that one foot in front of the other, they walked on, period. Again, the crunch, crunch, crunch of the feet on the ground is part of the reality. So when we now will listen to Rabbi Yossi, it's not simply that we should learn what Rabbi Yossi says and understand what Rabbi Yossi's propositions are and what he has to teach us. We're supposed to be in a you are there kind of mode. We're supposed to be walking along and listening to Rabbi Yossi as a person who is talking as he's walking, maybe even chewing gum. He's saying this as they're walking through the world, as they're walking through whatever environment they are in. Okay, as they were walking, Rabbi Yossi, go ahead.
Okay. Certainly everything the Blessed Holy One does in the world reflects a mystery of wisdom, all to manifest supernal wisdom to human beings. So from that act, they will learn mysteries of wisdom. All is fitting. All his actions, ways of Torah, for the ways of Torah are the ways of the Blessed Holy One. Even a tiny word contains countless ways, paths, mysteries of supernal wisdom.
Okay, commentary from our Chavraya here. So let's notice the idea of ways and paths. They're walking on a road. And now Rabbi Yossi is saying there are these paths, these pathways that lead us to supernal wisdom. And what's the building, not the building blocks, the paving blocks. What are the paving stones of these pathways? So if we walk along this text, if we walk along this paragraph, we actually go on a journey. We're set up for the journey by the words that say they walked on, they kept on going. As they were walking, Rabbi Yossi, etc. So I'm claiming that this places us in some kind of landscape, right? They're not in a room. They're not in the Beis Medrash, in the study hall. They're outside, walking on the road. And we might imagine when Rabbi Yossi says, certainly everything that the Blessed Holy One does in the world reflects a mystery of wisdom. How do we picture Rabbi Yossi physically when he's saying this? We're given a little bit of a head start. We know he's walking on the road and he says this.
He's walking through the Torah.
What?
He's walking through the Torah. He's walking through the words.
We didn't get through that yet. We didn't get to that at all. The word Torah doesn't come until later. They're walking on the road. They're walking in the world. And then he says, everything the Holy Blessed One does in the world reflects a mystery of wisdom, all to manifest supernal wisdom to human beings. So, and that we should be able to learn that supernal wisdom. The first association, simple pshat, is he's looking around. He's looking
the rocks and the flowers and the trees.
Yes, he's walking on the road. He's looking at the world. He goes, look, everything that the Kudsha B'richu does in this world is a manifestation, is an expression of some deep wisdom. Magadlu Masecha Yameodam Kumachavotecha. Look around at every single thing, right? You can discover infinity in a grain of sand. That's what we would be entitled to read these first words as referring to, because that's where we've been set up. And that's the terminology. He's the world. I'm looking at this world that I'm living in. And it's all full of God's works, right? Ma'asecha, right? And they're all works of deep wisdom trying to communicate to us. Yeah, Larry.
It's not just God manifested in nature, which that's true of a lot of religious thought, that you see a leaf and it's God manifested, but it's also that the manifestation of God has a secret in it, has an esoteric, it's something because it says supernal wisdom. It's not like what you learn in like biology lab, which is kind of, let's say, normal wisdom about the leaf, but there's something hidden.
Right. Yeah. So he's saying, let's take in all of this amazing stuff that we see around us. And guess what? There's something underneath it. There's something deeper, or there's something higher, supernal, right? It's the magnificence and the amazingness of what we can understand from this is simply a path, right, to some supernal revelation of wisdom that we can hope for. Then we keep on walking in this text. Mysteries of wisdom is what we're supposed to be learning. And then he keeps going. All is fitting. All his actions are ways of Torah. For the ways of the Torah are the ways of the Holy Blessed One. So now we've gone into Torah. Right? We've identified the ways of the Holy Blessed One as Torah. So again, at this point, we might still hold out and say, okay, so we've got the world itself is Torah, because Torah by definition is God's speech, God's expression, God showing and giving over something of God's self. However, we see, certainly from the very next word, from the very next sentence, even a tiny word contains countless ways, paths, mysteries of supernal wisdom. We've come back to the text. And maybe that's where he was all the time. So every word of the Torah, it's no longer the Torah as a metaphor, but the Torah is the Torah. Sometimes, like Freud said, sometimes the Torah is just the Torah. It doesn't stand for something else. It stands for itself. But however, what it stands for as itself, as Torah, is actually deep, deep or high mysteries of the divine. They are pathways. Every word of the Torah is a road that takes us through to supernal wisdom. So in this simple paragraph, we actually are taking on a whole trip where we come back out of, we go outside, and then we come back into the words of the Torah. But of course, the words of the Torah are not the physically written words on the parchment. I mean, they are, but their existence is outside the parchment, just like these sages are outside the Beis Medrash. Just like they're not sitting around with their books of Talmud or their books of Chumash or a scroll of the Torah and peering in and looking at each word and going into the esoteric higher meanings. The words of the Torah, they have carried those words, those letters and those words, they've carried it outside. This is all Torah that they know by heart. This is all Torah that they know by mouth. This is their own talking out of the Torah. So they are themselves bringing the words of the Torah that are written in the parchment, bringing them out into living existence as well. Right? And he's going to start talking about that in a second. So, and it's all together. Let's remember that this is part of this idea of the fitting. Everything is fitting. Fitting is fitting together, fitting one piece with another, and also appropriate, correct. Right? This is still a pondering eventually back to the Jacob and Esau problem. So it all makes sense. It all is coherent. And it's just a matter of getting into that highest wisdom that we need to walk the paths of in order to arrive there. Okay. Comments, or we go on? We go on. Let's keep walking.
Come and see, for Rabbi Yochanan, son of Zakkai, tendered 300 legal decisions in the mystery of supernal wisdom based on the verse. His wife's name was daughter of Matred, daughter of Mezahab.
Right. So let's stop just for a second. So this how about, all right, you'll read 405, please.
Okie doke. We'll have to just find where it begins. Rabbi Yochanan rendered 300 legal decisions. This seemingly insignificant verse contains immense wisdom relating to the demonic realm. The subject of the verse is Hadar, last of the Edomite kings listed in Genesis 36, who are reinterpreted in Kabbalah as demonic archons.
Okay, so that's good enough. If we look at Genesis 36, At the very end of the chapter, verse 31, we read as follows. This is the long section that gives Esav, a lot of attention in terms of his whole dynasty and the generations of Esav's family after he goes his own way and pursues his own destiny. And then verse 31 from chapter 36 reads, Ve'ela hamalachim asher malchu be'eretz Edom, lifnei meloch melech livnei Yisrael. Very intriguing verse that has raised eyebrows for all kinds of readers. And these are the kings who ruled in the land of Edom before any king ruled for the children of Israel. So the anachronistic quality of this verse was noticed right away. Who's talking? Who knows anything about a king being in Israel? We're in the patriarchal era. Jacob is just beginning his career. We don't have kings until much later. So of course this, is something that many people say, so you see, this is a much later text than what a traditional reader might assume. And then what we start going through. Vayimloch be'Edom Bela ben Beor. So we have a king in Edom, in Esav's nation, Bela, the son of Beor, V'shem Yirod din Hava, Vayamot Bela, Vayimloch tachtav Yovav, etc. Vayamot Yovav, Vayimloch tachtav Husham. So first Bela is the king, and then he dies, and somebody else becomes the king. And then the next person becomes the king, and he dies, and then the next person becomes the king. So this happens 8 times. Finally, the last one is Vayimloch tachtav, and after him, after Hanan ben Achbor dies, then the person who reigned instead of him is Hadar, is a man named Hadar. Shem Yiro Pa'u, and his city was Pa'u, right? And then it says, V'shem Ishto Mehetavel bat Mitrad bat Mezahav, and his wife's name was Mehetavel, the daughter of Mitrad, the daughter of Mezahav, the quote that we have here. And that's the end of the list of these kings. So this is, intriguingly, we're not going to talk about it much at all. In fact, it doesn't say that he died. But we have these kings of Edom who reign and die. What do we need it for? Number one. Number two, none of the other kings have their queen mentioned. And then this guy, Hadar, his queen, right, his wife, Mehetavel, is mentioned. So what's that all about? So what we have here, the Zohar says, look, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was able to get out of this seemingly meaningless and superfluous set of words and verses, he was able to get 300 different halachas, right? 300 halachas. He was able to darshan, he was able to exegetically derive from this seemingly meaningless, boring, superfluous text. So that, of course, has a rabbinic, as the notes tell us, has rabbinic antecedents. But as the note also tells us, for the Zohar and for other Mekubalim, this text is a text that opens up the whole thorny topic of the demonic realm of evil itself. And this is a major text for one of the most important, if not the most important text of the Zohar, the Idra Rabbah, the Great Assembly, which is a text that is considered the heart of the Zohar, and which talks in very poetic and elusive ways about the deepest secrets of creation. And to say something which will not explain anything, but just to refer to it, the death of the kings is identified in the Zohar with the ancient myth that God created many worlds and destroyed them before God created this world. Borei olamot umachrivan. Borei olamot umachrivan. That God was trying out how to create the world, and God was not happy with the different versions of reality that God created, and God destroyed them. So on the simplest level, these kings of Edom are the rejected worlds that God tried out and then decided they were no good, literally. And God destroyed them. That's their death. Seems like Hadar did not die. And that's part of the question that we keep talking about practically every session that we're in. So the mystery of the demonic, the mystery of evil, is somehow seen to be encoded, encrypted in that text. So instead of that text actually being totally uninteresting and of total, irrelevance to anything that we would be, really crucially interested in, it actually is, in some kind of mysterious way, really talking about some of the ultimate questions of existence and of life. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sees this and was able to find out, and here we have this kind of, it's both in a giveaway, but it's also a distraction. 300 halachot. For the Zohar, it's not about halachot, right? It's about mysteries of understanding where Esav and where the demonic actually fits into the organization of reality. Okay, so go ahead.
These he revealed only to Rabbi Elazar, who accompanied him, indicating how many supernal mysteries in every single incident of Torah, in every single word lies wisdom, Torah of truth. So those words of Torah are holy words, disclosing wonders, as is said, uncover my eyes so I can see wonders out of your Torah.
Okay, that's the verse that we say every time we recite that prayer to introduce our study of the Zohar when we get together on Thursday nights. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is given a particular role. What is his role? He's the discoverer of these halachot, or these mysteries, right? So he's given a creative and active role, but then he reveals them to a limited audience of one, right? He only told it to Rabbi Elazar. So if you look at the note 406,
these he revealed only to Rabbi Elazar, son of Arach, an outstanding student of Rabbi Yochanan, son of Zakkai, who engaged in speculation on the Merkava, the divine chariot, although later editions of the Zohar read here, Rabbi Elazar, son of Hyrcanos. The early editions and nearly all the MSS read Rabbi Elazar.
Okay, that's all. That's enough.
Good.
Oh, that's good. So the citations, it's okay. We don't need that. So Danny Matt prefers the reading that he gave it over to Rabbi Elazar, his prime student, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Other readings are, which he thinks are not the preferable readings, but they have it Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer Agado, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is credited in a number of rabbinic sources as also learning 300 halachos from this and from that, and it's all about demonic and mystical stuff. And he becomes the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. So there's basis for reading a Rabbi Eliezer. I didn't look at all the manuscripts and so on, but we have for us right now. It's not important whether it's Rabbi Elazar ben Arach or Rabbi Eliezer, but he is the dear student who is, who's given this esoteric wisdom. He doesn't create it, he receives it. And of course, that's what the word Kabbalah means. Kabbalah means reception of a tradition. So now his job is to preserve it, right? So the creation of the wisdom is not, in this case, explained as being some revelation from Sinai. It's not something that God shows somebody, but they actually are able to get it out of deep reading of the verse. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is capable of reading the verse and cracking the code. So his student who accompanied him is the faithful student, but he's on a secondary level, right? He's not capable of cracking the code, but he's capable of learning the lesson. He's capable of preserving the mystery once it's conveyed to him. Right? And this is, of course, part of what the Zohar's whole existence is all about. The Zohar sees itself as cracking the code often and then passing it on and hoping that the rest of us will be able to faithfully get it and hold on to it. Right? But there's unique people who are able to crack the code. For the Zohar, the most exemplary one is Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the one who can do this the best of all. Okay, so, but this is all by way of a tangent to show that out of the most seemingly meaningless words of the Torah, every single word has Torah of truth, wisdom. Okay, if only we can open our eyes. If only God helps us to open our eyes. Okay? And then we need to open our ears and our hearts. So now he's going to bring us back to, he's already alluded to this Esav and Jacob by talking about Mehitavel, talking about the list of kings of Esav. But now he's going to bring us slowly back into the story again. Come and see.
Come and see, when that serpent deceived Adam and his wife, approaching the woman, injecting her with slime, thereby seducing Adam, the world was defiled and cursed because of him. He inflicted death upon the entire world. The world stood poised to punish him until the tree of life appeared, atoning for Adam, subduing that serpent so that he would never dominate the seed of Jacob. For when Israel offered a goat, that serpent was overturned, turning into a servant, as has been said. Therefore Jacob offered his father 2 seirim goats, one to subdue Esav, who is Seir, a hairy demon, one for the rung on which Esav was dependent, to which he clung, as has been said.
Okay, so there's a lot in this paragraph. But we have here, you know, the kind of collapsing of all of of human history and all of the Torah stories into this, dialogue between the very first sin of humanity, and then fast forward all the way to Jacob and Esau, as the place where this original sin, to coin a phrase, could be repaired. So you have the serpent seducing Adam, and seducing Adam means seducing Adam and Eve, and infecting her, injecting her with zuhama, with slime, and creating demons as a result, and bringing death to the world. Okay, so this is all ancient history, literally. And then we have the world stood poised to punish him. So who's punishing who? Who's being punished, and what does it mean the world is poised to punish him? So look at 408.
Okay. Because of him, he inflicted death to punish him. The pronouns could refer to the serpent, but from what follows, they apparently referred to Adam. For various applications of the phrase inflicted death.
Okay, etc., etc. Okay, thank you. So who's going to be punished? If we see the rest of the continuation, it seems that atoning for Adam is what prevents the punishment. So the punishment would have been to Adam. Who wants to punish Adam? The world. What does that mean? Who is the world? What is the world here?
It's everything but humans, basically. It's all of nature, everything that was created before man. That's all there is to the world until Adam and Eve leave Eden and start reproducing. Okay, so that's a fair reading, right? So, and why would the world, or how can we ascribe to the world this desire to punish Adam? Because the world as a whole was not better off after Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden. Worse, the world is made worse, right? Yes. The world is cursed. Death is brought into the world. So the world has enough to complain about. If we say it's everything but the human beings, again, remember, these people are walking. I tried to set that up ahead of time, right? The world is everything around all of us, right? When you're walking on the road and looking around, it's everything that there is. Everything that there is, what did we just identify that to be? It's all God's will. It's all God's expression, right? It's all of what God created or put forth or spoke forth, right? That's everything right by at the very beginning. Certainly everything the Blessed Holy One does in the world reflects a mystery of wisdom, etc., etc., etc. So we have this link of associations. The world is personified, so to speak, as being angry, as being seeking to punish Adam for ruining, hurting, damaging it. The world is, to use the handy term that we use as the meeting place of the two, the world is Shekhinah. Right? The world is the world as God, and that's Shekhinah as that aspect of God which manifests in the world. And now that aspect of God is angry and upset because human beings have ruined everything. So they want to punish Adam. Don't take it personally. So, and then until the tree of life appeared, atoning for Adam and subduing that serpent. So the tree of life, we are familiar with the tree of life. The tree of life is the other tree. Right? There are two trees in the garden. One is the tree of life, one is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then, according to the simple reading of the story in the Torah, God says, uh-oh, these people are out of control. In another second, they're going to go and get from the tree of life. We throw them out of the Garden of Eden so that, God forbid, literally, they shouldn't ruin things even more by taking from the tree of life. Right? That's the way that the Torah seems to be unfolding. Here the Zohar turns it upside down. And the Torah says it's by virtue of the tree of life that Adam and Eve are saved. It's by virtue of the fact that the tree of life is there. The tree of life will subdue the serpent. The tree of life will subdue death. Death is the result of evil and sin. And the tree of life is the growing, burgeoning, verdant flow of life. And that's going to overcome and defeat the serpent. And as a result, save Adam. And when we say Adam, we mean Adam and Eve. We mean humanity. So what tree of life is that? So again, if we look at 409.
Tree of life appeared, atoning for Adam. Jacob symbolizes Tiferet, the tree of life. By outwitting Esav, who symbolizes the serpent, he overcame the demonic powers and rectified Adam's sin.
So this is the overcoming of evil is achieved through the tree of life, who is Jacob himself. So we are moving or oscillating at warp speed almost between Jacob, the human being, and Jacob, the divine hypostasis of the tree of life and of God's core being, which is identified as a source of life. The tree of life feeds into Shekhinah, who is the tree of the world, right? So again, we have another way of having God overcome God's own rage at what we have done. The tree of life overcomes Shekhinah's wounded sense of anger and desire for justice and for retribution. Right? If we can somehow interpose Jacob in the nick of time, this will save Adam. And this is why Jacob has to be both. Jacob has to be the divine energy of life. Jacob has to be a person. Jacob has to be a human being so that Jacob can redeem the mess that the first human being, which is all of us, created. So this is the possibility of redemption through the fact that, guess what? Not all of us are Esav. Not all of us are Esav. I mentioned it, in the Dvar Torah for this Shabbos. That's one of the key themes of of the Torah reading, the beginning of Shemot, the beginning of the book of Exodus, is that as Exodus sets up the scene, the big picture is that Egypt is ruled by a murderous, evil ruler, tyrant, who gets his whole nation to support his racism, his genocidal fears, his policies, and his actions that kill people, that enslave people. The whole nation of Egypt is implicated in that. And then from the first pages of Shemot, no, look at this person who's a good person and who actually defies the system. The mialdot, the midwives, don't go along. Why? Because they're less afraid of Pharaoh than they are of God. They have reverence for God, and therefore they're not going to do this. Period. And then Pharaoh's own daughter is not going to take. She notices a Hebrew baby floating on the Nile, and the right thing for her to do in her society is drown the baby. That's what's supposed to be done. That's Pharaoh's law. And instead, she raises the baby, and she gives the baby life. This is the tree of life. This is the tree of life overcoming the serpent. And it's not an accident, certainly for the Zohar, that the serpent plays such a major role as a symbolic creature within the fight between Pharaoh and Moses. So we have, thank God, every once in a while, maybe at the last moment, we have people who redeem humanity, who redeem society. And we need them desperately. So that's what happened here. So, and the fact that such a victory can happen, says the Zohar, subduing that serpent so that he would never dominate the seed of Jacob. So that the final victory would not go to the serpent. Because the serpent starts out with a big head start. The serpent gets in there, right at the beginning of all of human history and wins. And the odds of a total victory are very much in the serpent's favor, right? With such a head start, with such an advantage, and this is where Jacob has to overturn it. This is where Jacob comes in and turns the tables, which of course again comes back to that whole sticky question of, did Jacob actually have to do it that way? And the answer is yes, this is exactly the point. All right, so, and again, historically, a collapse of time, right? The first moment of human history is hanging by a thread and is saved generations and generations and generations later by Jacob. The imagery, of course, still harking back to the Garden of Eden story. And then we have this, which we had already, we have this combination of our Yom Kippur rituals with the actual moment of Jacob serving his father. So just as Israel serves his father, Isaac, with 2 goats, so too Israel, the people, served their Father in heaven with 2 goats on Yom Kippur in order to achieve atonement. So when Israel offered a goat, that serpent was overturned, turning into a servant. Okay, so that's nice in the English. Doesn't quite work in the Aramaic, but that doesn't matter. We had this already before, right? So that in the end, Varav Yavot Sa'ir, the masterly one, the older one, the word Rav has this sense of might and power. Yavot Sa'ir will serve the one who is the younger one, who comes later, right? Jacob comes later in the way that this story is told, because he's so much later, he's so much younger than Adam and Eve, right? The older ones that stumble are saved by the younger one. And therefore the servant quality is established. The serpent will not be the master. The evil will not be the complete victor, but it will be turned into the servant. All right, so therefore we have the 2 Seirim, and then we have the play on the word. So Esav is called Sa'ir, and that's from the verse earlier when he's born and when he's introduced to us. And the words therefore have certain power to operate in this function of overturning, right? The Sa'ir is overturned by the Sa'ir. And this is where we get the words again, right? This is what we had at the beginning when Rabbi Yossi says, the words of the Torah have power. The words of the Torah reflect and express mysteries. So it's not just a pun. It's not just a nice linguistic echo. Oh, look, the word Sa'ir and the word Seir, are similar. But for the Zohar, that similarity is not an accident. That similarity exists because this whole mythic struggle depends on it. So the words are reflecting forces that are brought to bear on each other in order to change reality, in order to save the world for goodness. Okay. We pause for a half a second, take a breath. Anybody have anything to say? Okay. So we continue.
So the world existed until there appeared a woman resembling Eve and a man resembling Adam, who would deal tortuously, cunningly with that evil serpent and his rider, as has all been explained.
Okay. So who is the woman and who is the man? You can take a peek, it's in the notes. Right? Rebecca and Jacob. And Rebecca is considered here to be the tikkun for Eve, and Jacob, as we had already, is the one who will atone for the tikkun, the fixer-upper for Adam. Now, so just a half a second, and this is, in some ways, a very, very good juxtaposition of the 2 stories. Eve is the one who gets Adam to do what he was reluctant to do. And she says, no, it's good. Take my word for it. And Rebecca is the one who gets Jacob to do what he is reluctant to do. And says, I'll take the curse. Now, of course, that's exactly what happened with Adam and Eve. They were subjected to a curse. And here we have the powerful woman, or the influential woman, the seductive woman. This time it's not a spouse, it's the mother. But she's got the wily understanding of what has to change here. And she influences the pliant male to do what needs to be done. So in that sense, there's an, the Zohar has noticed something. I think that's right there in the text. Mark has a thing in the chat. What about the reversal? Eve from Adam, Jacob from Rebecca. So you're going to have to explain that with Torah Shabbat Peh. You have to say that orally. I don't understand exactly what you mean.
Unless I made a stupid mistake. Isn't Rebecca Jacob's mother?
Yes, I said that.
I know. So Eve comes from Adam's body, and Jacob comes from...
Oh, interesting. So cool. Very cute. I hadn't thought of that. Very nice. Good. All right. So everybody following? Yes, good. I'm slow. What can I tell you? Good. So, and this, of course, again brings us back to then the cunningly, right? To do this.
Does that mean anything?
I think
that reversal.
I think that's another example of the tikkuning, of the fixing. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Larry.
I was just going back to the thing about the two goats. So one goat goes to Azazel, and that's Esav as demon. And one goat goes to Hashem, and that is the Gevura, but it's also related to Esav because Esav derives from Gevura. So what I was just sort of wondering is, to what extent is a demonic outside of God versus the demonic is part of God or derived from God? And I guess it raises another question about the Zohar's theology in general, which is there anything outside of God?
Right, so bingo. That's exactly the problem that we have been discussing forever. You just phrased it very, very well. And this is, I want to just again, easily, quickly say the obvious point, which is there is no such thing as the theology of the Zohar.
Okay.
There are many theologies to be found in many different parts of the Zohar. And this question that you just phrased is a key question. Do we see evil as something that must be separated, conceptually and otherwise? Evil is anti-God. You can't say that God is evil. God forbid. That's heresy. And so therefore it must be something completely outside. But then of course we get into the problem, like you just said. What do you mean outside of God? How could there be anything? Letatar panui mine. There is nothing. There is no space that is empty of God. God is all there is. So if God is all there is, then God must incorporate evil within God's self also. So this is the circle that we keep on like mice in a cage. This is the circle that we keep running on, the wheel that we keep running on again and again and again and again and again. That is the paradoxical conundrum. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, right. And that's, of course, just to review something that we noticed a long time ago. I mean, we were just pointing out that Jacob is Rebekah's son, right? Just Jacob comes out of Rebekah the same way that Eve comes out of Adam, right? So, and Jacob is the savior here. But guess who else came out of Rebekah? Exactly. Right. So that's the problem right there. Right. Okay. So that's we've been dealing with this in many different variations again and again and again, as we've talked about this story and previous stories as well. This is one of the key problems for the Zohar. All right. We have a couple of more minutes yet. All right. He opened.
He opened saying, Asaph became...
That's enough. Thank you. So who opened?
Rabbi Yossi?
So it seems that it's the same Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi has been talking, and now Rabbi Yossi is credited with saying a new thing. Right? So again, we should just like within our experience of walking along with them, so we sort of now have a different sense of the text that we just had. Right, the text that we just had is now seen as actually a kind of a preliminary, subsidiary text to what we're about to start. Right, that when we have patach, that he opened, that's a signal. Get ready. There's going to be some kind of opening up, literally an opening. Your eyes are going to get wider. Your understanding will become opened up, right? This is it's a phrase that comes out of Midrash, where it simply means he opened up his discourse with the following verse. But for the Zohar, the opening up also has that meaning of opening up, right? Just like, open my eyes, uncover my eyes so that I can see some wisdom, so that I can see the wonders. So the fact that he's been talking all this time and he mostly is sort of looking back and reviewing things that we have talked about in one way or another up to now. And now he's sort of like revving himself up. This is a little bit, we can think about this in terms of when we pray, in the traditional prayers. When we stand for the Amidah, traditionally, there's a little meditation that we say before we begin the Amidah. Does anybody remember what that meditation says?
Hashem's Sfasai Tiftach.
Right.
Yagid Tilatecha.
Right. So this is Hashem's Sfatai Tiftach. Eternal, you shall open my mouth, or please open my mouth, so that my lips, so that my mouth can utter praises to you. Okay? So that's what we say as a meditation to start the Amidah. Let me ask you, what have we been doing until then? Our mouth has not been open. We said the Shema just 15 seconds earlier.
Right.
Right? We said blessings.
And Psalms.
And before that, we said Psalms. Right? So the answer is that all of that is in some sense preparatory to when we actually stand in that silent prayer before God. It's qualitatively different. That moment of standing before God, that's the opening moment. Everything else is the warm-up acts. Everything else is, and it could be great, warm-up acts can be super terrific, but they are nevertheless, they are introductory to an opening that we wish for when we stand silently before God. To a certain extent, that's what's happened here. Rabbi Yossi has been talking and thinking and teaching and delving, and now he's going to open. Now he's going to open and say something else, and he's at a different place, a different moment. All right. I think that we'll keep it at that point.
This evening's been like Portnoy's complaint. Now we're ready to begin.
Right. There you go. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Glenn,
Thank you.
thank you for your note. I got it today. Thank you very much. So, and hopefully we'll see each other next week.
Yeah.
Ashkar, thank you.